Good Monday morning. It is the 13th of February, and it's episode 178 of the 359 podcast with Roger Cheng, Ben Fox Rubin, and Joni Salzman, all crammed into this tiny little podcast studio.
Yeah.
Good
Happy
morning,
Monday.
everybody.
Happy Monday.
Is it?
Is it happy? Yeah.
Sure.
We'll make it happy.
That's right. It's happier now that we're on this podcast.
And we're
Right.
talking about some weird stuff
Yes.
today.
Not that weird. I mean, we're talking about the Grammys. Very topical, right? We're going to be talking about Chance the Rapper and why his win is so revolutionary. And then we'll spend the rest of the time talking about Verizon surprisingly jumping into an unlimited data plan.
And
which-
Roger gets to eat some crow.
Yeah, I
on that
know,
one.
I know. By the way, they were just touting their 5 gig plan like a week ago. Like, you don't need unlimited. You just need 5 gigs. So it's not just me. I think there's a lot of folks inside
I've been seeing a
Verizon.
lot of those commercials.
Huh?
5 gig. On
They're
Verizon.
everywhere.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. I know.
It's not a lot of gigs.
I don't even watch that much
anything
TV.
It is for the dude that's going up an escalator and getting into an elevator
Yeah.
and just kind of walking around with his phone everywhere.
Yeah, he seems to have his life put together.
Yeah.
Well, he definitely has his life together. He's in
You
a
know
Verizon
what's the funny
commercial.
thing about that
Come on.
commercial though? There's like one part of it where it's like him and a girl and they're in an audience and they're both looking at their phones except there's nobody else in the audience except for like one other person who's like, "Excuse me, can I get by?" And they have to like stand up and let him by. And there's literally like every seat around them is empty.
I hate that guy. That guy is
Like,
not a nice guy.
The guy that's walking through.
Right.
He's not
All
a
right,
nice
all
guy.
right. Let's.
It's true.
We've broken down the topics. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments section. Brian will pick out the best. We will try to answer them in 4 minutes or less.
All right, let's get this recording out of the way. Here we go for the 359 podcast, episode 178 in 3, 2.
Welcome to the 359, where we talk about the top tech news of the day and all the other crap we want to throw in. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Ben Fox Rubin.
And I'm Joni Salzman.
So congrats to Chance the Rapper, who won big at the Grammys last night. He won for Best New Artist, Rap Album, and Rap Performance. And that's despite the fact that he's never sold an album or track. So we've got media maven Joan Salzman here to talk about why this is such a big deal. So break it down for us.
Right. So this is the first time that an artist who pretty much exclusively streams his music, doesn't sell it as a CD or as a download, has not only been nominated for a Grammy, but won in some epic categories for his genre.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think the fact that Chance the Rapper has reached the level of popularity that he has without being on a label and without selling anything, the traditional ways that you make a name for yourself in the recording industry.
We were talking about this before. Like, it's kind of mind-blowing that, like, he hasn't sold anything. That Ben was kind of surprised that he could just download the song. He's like, where's the
Ben
part
was
where
very
I pay?
confused.
I was
Where
very
do I
confused.
pay for this
Where
song?
do I pay?
I'm super
How do
old.
How do I get it?
I didn't even realize this. I was trying to buy Same Drugs last week and I couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it on iTunes.
No.
Right.
I couldn't I ended up opening SoundCloud. I eventually like gave in and was just like, okay, here's where it is. But for
Because you
somebody
felt
that's
like you were
used
maybe
to-
getting it illegally if you were going to SoundCloud, or
No, I just like I
You never
was
thought about
through-
going to SoundCloud at all.
I
Yeah.
purchased no, and so now I'm like using SoundCloud more because that's a way for me to like actually find his stuff. So
That's
that's,
a good
great
point. Do
for
you
the
think-
streaming services.
Do you think Chance's shout out to SoundCloud yesterday
Mhm.
will have any kind of effect? Because like SoundCloud
they
isn't.
could use a bump.
They can, right? Because
Yeah.
they're not really. People don't really know what SoundCloud is.
Well,
right?
it depends. It's kind of like YouTube with older people versus younger people.
Right. Okay.
Like younger people, if you say like the comment like nobody really knows what SoundCloud is, like, well, yeah, like nobody under 30 would really agree with that.
Okay.
I'm not under
Which
30.
yeah, I'm not.
None of
Which
us
is
are.
none of us.
Yes.
Unless you're on a media beat, and therefore you do know them
Right.
about them. But what's interesting about like even the Grammys had to tweak their own. I've got rap in my head. They had to tweak their own rules to let Chance even be eligible. So the
Okay,
fact
yeah.
that he's been on like the Billboard chart, like his album was on the Billboard chart for like 33 weeks in a row without ever selling anything in a store or
Yeah.
on iTunes. It's just by having streaming equivalents.
That's pretty amazing.
So much streaming
Yeah.
that it manages to get charted for the majority of the time it's released in the year it's released.
And most of the time, the songs who are up there usually have this huge machine behind them. Right?
Yeah, and he doesn't have a machine other than the fact that he like hits the pavement and he tours a lot and he builds up an audience by actually like communicating with them.
I mean, do you think you'll see more artists doing it this way, sort of this kind of?
It would be
grassroots
amazing
thing?
to see more artists doing it this way and getting recognition for it. Because there are a lot of artists that do it this way. and have a hard time making a living off of it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
He's put in a lot of work, and he also is an incredible artist. Like he also writes really great.
Right. It helps that the songs are actually good.
Yeah.
So,
So
all right.
but that would be interesting to see. Like it would be more egalitarian in the music industry
For sure.
if people's talent is what means they become successful.
That's what the internet's supposed to be about, right?
Yeah, man.
Maybe. I don't know. Next up, Verizon is back on the unlimited bandwagon. Color me genuinely surprised and wrong. I thought they weren't going to do this, but they had actually scoffed at the notion of unlimited for quite a while now. But this new plan, $80 a month, which is pricier than what T-Mobile and Sprint offer, but they say that you get full HD streaming video, which the other two don't offer for this plan. Ben, you're a Verizon customer. Is this something you'd be interested in?
We would definitely look into it, but I think $80 a month seems pretty expensive. I think we get 16 gigs now for whatever deal Verizon threw at us recently. So why we would switch over to that, I'm not really sure. It's also interesting to see like T-Mobile, if you get 4 lines, it's like $40.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So $80 for 1 line, I don't know how competitive that is. It doesn't, at first glance, it doesn't seem that good to me.
Well, keep in mind with a plan of 4, I believe there is actually a discount to it.
Right. So for 1 line, it's $70 a month.
Okay.
I looked it up ahead of time.
Okay.
Sprint, it's like $50 a month.
No, for Verizon. Verizon offers you
really?
a group rate. Yeah.
Well, I'm still like totally confused about all these plans. Like they're all like, it's very complicated. It's kind of like doing your taxes.
Oh, here it is. It's the $80 for the first line, and then each additional line is $45.
Okay.
So
I don't know.
yeah, you gotta do a lot of math.
We're probably going to stick with what we're doing now, but it's nice that they finally decided to become somewhat competitive. So
yeah, I mean, I think
good
this
for
is
you, Verizon.
That's what it came down to. It's not the fact that their network all of a sudden is great and can handle unlimited. It's more the fact that T-Mobile, Sprint, and even AT&T offer unlimited, and they just saw the writing on the wall. They decided, okay, we've got to do this too.
Yeah.
So, all right, for more of these stories, check us out on CNET. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Ben Fox Rubin.
I'm Joni Salzman.
Thanks for listening.
Not much going on in the chat today.
I have a quick question that we didn't get to.
Yeah.
So, Joan, how concerned is like the music industry about the fact that Chance the Rapper was able
How
to be
threatening
this?
is that?
Yeah, how threatening is it that he was able to actually be successful doing this?
I mean, I don't think that it's threatening. I don't think it's threatening because, like, what would the threat of him be? Because maybe the threat would be like, if en masse artists were like, screw you, music labels, I'm not gonna sign with you when you dangle all these big checks in front of me. Like, Universal can still dangle really big checks in front of people, like to get them to sign and then own their soul and own their music.
So in
whatever.
that,
Sorry, that made me sound really down on the music labels, but that's like the perspective that a
that's-
fiercely independent artist like Chance the Rapper would have. Like,
So is this kind of analogous to like YouTube stars who make it big on their own? Like, is that kind of what it's like? Because they don't sell anything and all their videos are free.
with YouTube stars, though, it's that's more threatening to traditional television because traditional television makes its money from advertising and from cable subscriptions.
Right.
And if people decide they don't really need to pay for cable subscriptions anymore, then they lose money there. And if advertising dollars start going towards YouTube instead of going to TV budgets, then it's threatening there. With music, it's a little bit different because like Chance the Rapper, he subscribes to like the idea of a subscription service. Like he puts his music on Spotify, which has that premium tier. It's also on Apple Music, I believe.
and Amazon Music Unlimited.
Yeah, so he's not hardcore saying like it needs to be only free.
He just happens to offer a free option.
Yeah, and so that's not really threatening because the advertising has the music industry doesn't really have an advertising based model inherent in it, so it's not threatening that needs to go away. What's threatening is the fact that there are these services like YouTube, which he's not on, but like YouTube, where the only money that the music industry gets from YouTube is through ad-supported share, ad revenue share. Sorry, so that gets complicated. But basically, YouTube is a lot more threatening to the music industry than Chance the Rapper is. Like, if there's a threat in streaming, it's from YouTube as an institution and a place where lots and lots of people listen to lots and lots of music than, like, one person who was really dedicated to streaming really getting successful.
Then how does YouTube Red and subscription play into this?
Well, the problem with YouTube Red is that not very many people subscribe to it.
Not yet.
Not yet. As far as like they haven't disclosed any numbers, and usually what that means is there aren't a lot of people
Not to brag about.
Yeah. If they had a number to brag about, usually they brag about it. And it's hard to reach a number where you can brag.
So
it's a weird landscape. I mean, I use SoundCloud. I use a multitude of different stuff: SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Google Play, Spotify. Pretty much the only one I don't really use is iTunes.
Neither do I, but that's just my way.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, occasionally when that's the only place to get something I want, I'll go there and buy it. But I'm not.
You don't use
I'm not
Apple
using
Music?
Apple Music, so
Okay. Yeah.
as far as like my listening regular habit,
Right.
I
So
do
with-
like SoundCloud a lot though.
With Chance, my other question is like, how much money is he actually making if he's only pursuing streaming? I mean,
Right.
like I've read that, most of the money that he makes is off of merchandising and touring. But if he's not signing with a music label, he's not selling physical copies of his music. Is he
Right.
missing out on like millions of dollars in sales?
I mean, that's a really theoretical question
Mm-hmm.
because part of the reason that he's reached the level of success that he has is because he has the kind of independence that he does without being on a label. Like he doesn't have to like answer anybody's notes. He can release the music when he wants. He can do things that are responsive to his audience, that he knows is working. And so it's hard to like say, would he be making billions of dollars rather than like millions of dollars if he was on a label? It's just hard to say because so much comes down to what your contract is with your label. Like he doesn't have to like label contracts with artists. The amount you get paid for what you stream is the same for every artist basically when it goes to the artist like Chance or to the label. And then your contract at the label is where like you start to lose, it starts to degrade. Like the label starts taking
So he
their
gets
chunk.
he basically gets a full cut.
He
from
gets the
streaming.
full cut and he has total control over where things
Right.
go. And so if he's not making money on streaming, then he wouldn't have to have it there. But he's thinking about it in like a 21st century way where the recording isn't the product. He is the product. Touring is the product. That's how he makes money. Like it's a 21st century way of thinking about recordings as not being the thing that you sell, but being your own advertising.
Speaking of that, Nicholas from Sweden in the chat says, "Seems to me like Chance the Rapper is simply ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
This way of spreading music will probably be common practice in the future." I think we all agree with that.
I kind of agree
Yeah.
with that.
I mean, whether
We'll
or not
see a
people will
little-
blow up
Yeah.
on a regular basis is, I think, up in
Well,
the air.
that's on the artist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They actually have to put out good stuff.
Right.
Which
Right.
there's a lot that's not.
Yeah, but Joan, that also makes a lot of sense. What you said is that like everything's moving towards streaming anyway. So like you said, like folks in the industry don't seem threatened by him because physical CD sales and digital downloads, like those are all going down. So the fact that he's in streaming means that like this guy just said, he's slightly ahead of the curve. He's just doing it much more as a pure play as opposed to what other folks are doing,
Yeah.
where they're trying to make money in all these other ways as well.
Yeah. He definitely has more of a sort of it's like part of his philosophy. He's not like golden mean, very like philosophical about I'll put a little bit here and I'll put a little bit here. He found a thing that worked for him and his audience before anybody else had really was able to reach a level of success that he has reached. So he's kind of the first in that regard. He is the first in that regard.
But there have been other people who have been
But yeah.
embracing the online thing for
Yeah.
ages. I mean, look back
Yeah.
to MySpace.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
totally.
that last
Yeah.
death knell of that site was music, and it still hung on to it.
It's actually really, I mean, like I don't know nearly as much about the music industry as you do, but it is pretty interesting to think about how long it took an artist to really reach this pinnacle.
Yeah.
That's like,
Well, I think that speaks to the reason that they had to change the rules to let him reach that pinnacle. Like, you don't reach that pinnacle unless the people who decide who's allowed to climb the mountain let you climb.
Oh,
you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
preach. Absolutely. But at the same
And that's
time,
where
like,
there's-
was there somebody behind Chance the Rapper or like a precursor to Chance the Rapper that we don't know about that like could have potentially won a Grammy if they hadn't changed the rules?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's possible, but I think that it is part of a progression in the fact that the music industry have been undergoing this progression where it's starting to accept the fact that streaming is its future more and more. So like the fact that it's a progressive thing that Nielsen and Billboard would start to include streaming equivalents in charting. And so therefore you're able to measure that he was on the Billboard 200 charts, Coloring Book was on the Billboard 200 charts for 33 weeks out of the year for an album that came out in May. So the fact it's this kind of like push and pull of the recording industry accepting the fact that things are changing and that allowing people to rise to the definition of what like a pinnacle is
But
under
also,
the old industry.
but it also
standards.
took someone who was successful enough
Yeah,
to
yeah.
nudge the industry to go
Yeah.
this way, right?
Yeah,
so it's
totally.
definitely kind of a chicken and egg thing.
Yeah.
Be curious to find out if anybody in the chat what other streaming services you are a fan of. What
I'd
you
be
think
interested in
works
that
for
too.
you. Like I said, I use Spotify and SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Google Play, and even some of our subscription affiliates like Stitcher and so
Wow.
on.
Stitcher. I haven't heard
But that's
Stitcher
really
before.
not a place for much
Except for-
music.
Except for when I
Every
say
time when you
Stitcher,
say it.
yeah.
But I mean, that's more tradition. Like that's kind of a forward step in talk radio than it is music,
Right.
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
The podcast is the
Yeah.
way of the future kind of thing.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
I
hope
also,
so.
this is an aside, but I love that they're called podcasts, although nobody, like, iPods aren't even made anymore.
Right.
Like, I love
They
that
just
there's
adopted
that.
that.
We just lost
It's
the
'cause
entire
on-
meaning of that, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
It's a pithy word for it,
Well,
but it has no real.
look at television. Anything that's on demand there is you TiVo it.
Yeah.
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 It's like you need a tissue, you need a Kleenex.
Yeah.
No one really actually. It's always about that brand familiarity, and if they can like sneak there in there,
It's
Apple's
funny.
all set
Yeah.
on the
Right.
radio
It'd be
show.
funny if, like, Apple just made, like, 27 cents because we all said podcast, like, 14 times.
They probably.
They've got some
If
sort
they
of
have-
royalty cut.
Right. That's what all the cameras are for.
Yeah.
So Apple can be like, ding.
There you go.
Chris Wesley says, "I love SoundCloud and Google Play, Spotify. I don't remember the last time I bought music."
Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
Yeah. I'm the
there's
same way.
more than a few times where if you this is a really indie artist and doesn't have like a distribution deal kind of thing, you're not going to find them on a major platform for
Yeah.
streaming on demand.
Yep.
You might have to go to a Bandcamp, and I do that more
Yeah.
often than not because that's literally the only way I'm going to be able to get something from them. At the same time, you can oftentimes just listen directly from that Bandcamp page if you don't even necessarily pay to download it and keep it. But if you want
Right.
to take it to go, you got to pay and download it.
I think the only song or only album I've downloaded in the last couple of years is that U2 one that Apple forced upon
The
everybody.
one that you had no choice.
Where it was like, here's an update. Oh, by the way, you also got this U2
Oh, the
album.
U2 album?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just like, oh,
awful.
all right, I've got this thing now. Didn't want it, but
I reset my phone a while ago and it popped back up. I'm like, you son of a bitch.
how dare you give me free music?
I still buy music. I just bought the Bruno Mars album, and
That's
I really
great.
like it.
If
I
it-
mean, that's
yeah.
how I listen to music. I listen to
the
same
music industry
stuff.
loves you.
I listen to the same stuff over and over and over again. So like streaming doesn't really work for me so much.
Yeah.
I guess I'll
Breaking
be
the curve,
forced to
Ben.
do it.
No, that's okay. Like, well, that's the great thing is that when there's more choice, I mean, it means more consumer choice. If you like to own your music and just listen to the same thing over again, you don't have to worry about paying a subscription to have it available offline when your train goes under. Like, you just have it,
Yeah.
and that's great for you. Radio, like, let's not discount the fact that as we're talking about streaming and how important that is for like finding things like Bandcamp, finding audience, but like radio is still the best, like the number one way that people discover new music is just by listening.
Which seems
on-
so archaic,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's true.
But it's totally true, and
Statistically.
maybe that'll change as cars become smarter.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to rely on these airwaves that have been around since whatever.
Put a
100 years
terabyte
ago.
hard drive in your trunk. and
Well,
Go
with
for it.
self-driving cars, that's
Not
pretty
far
much
off,
yeah,
yeah.
that's not that far off.
Right.
That
But
sounds
but
kinda
that but I
cool.
think that kind of also speaks to the fact like it's the megastars and the Beyoncés and the Adeles that are backed by huge labels. Like they're not going away until radio disappears. Like there's always going to be like a lowest common denominator.
Yeah,
artist.
all those channels play basically the same 50 popular songs in a
Yeah.
constant rotation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can't help but to be like hooked into it.
Yeah.
Rosalina says, I used to use RDO to listen to full albums.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But rest in peace. But
Yeah.
that got absorbed by what, Rhapsody? And then that whole thing went down, right?
No, well,
Or am I-
RDO was going out of business. If I remember, RDO was going bankrupt, going out of business, and Pandora bought like the assets for it.
The library.
Yeah, well, not the library, but like, it was like almost like an acqui-hire. Like it bought its tech and bought its staff. But yeah, RDO is one of those like beloved.
That was kind of pre-Spotify. Like, that was
Yeah.
kind of their thing, was like, you're going to go shopping there. Not necessarily have it as much curated like a Pandora type thing.
And
Even
it
though
was
Pandora's kind of going that route as well.
It got a lot of great accolades for its interface and being technologically having the most user friendly and the easiest, and a lot of people love that service. But it's hard, it's tough,
Yeah.
especially because no streaming services make any money. They
Right.
all lose
Yeah.
money. It's a
And
really hard business to do.
None of them are absolute. You can make fair arguments in favor of so many of them. They're so subjective.
Yeah.
Like Carlos says, they all have different things to offer. I use Spotify for playlists and quality sound, Apple Music for curated playlists and radio, SoundCloud, and TuneIn.
Yeah.
And TuneIn is pretty
Ooh,
much just a
TuneIn.
relay station for actual physical broadcast radio stations as well as online only streams. But
Right.
that's not the kind of thing where you're going fishing through a bank of assets. They're providing you a program.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool, Carlos.
Very cool.
You know
Yeah.
what you like. That's cool.
Also, what was Jay-Z's one called? I forgot. The big thing was
Oh,
Tidal.
Tidal.
Tidal. And that, I mean, that's
Whatever
where you
that
go
is.
for
Which
that
is
for
still
pure
around,
audio files.
amazingly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer quality of sound, that's their
Or
biggest sell
for
point.
now for Sprint customers.
Or some
who
exclusives.
may or may not even realize they have the service on their phone.
And that'll be kind of an interesting thing to see how that's going to skew the market is when exclusives really start to weigh in. You know, like people, I want a Netflix subscription because I like Marvel shows and
Yeah.
Right.
Amazon originals. I like Transparent. I got to get an Amazon subscription. If music starts to go that way with an artist,
Well,
is that going to cannibalize the industry?
so it's interesting because there's a lot of push and pull with exclusives right now. Spotify is doggedly against taking exclusives at all because they think it's bad for the artist, they think it's bad for the service, and they think it's bad for consumers because how frustrating is it when Kanye has a new album and you're a huge Kanye fan and you have to sign up for Tidal.
Yep.
And then you're like, I don't want to be signed up for Tidal because 3 weeks later you're just going to put it on your website, which he did.
Yeah.
And then like, I mean, that's very Kanye specific. The guy,
He's an island.
he's an island. Yeah. But
It's the nicest word I've
Yeah,
ever
After-
I know.
That was
but after
very
but after
diplomatic.
Frank Ocean did his kind of switcheroo, so do you know about this?
No.
All right, so the quick background about Frank Ocean. So Frank Ocean was signed to Universal, the single biggest label in the world, or to one of their sub labels. I can't remember exactly, but ultimately, like Universal is the people that owned his soul. So he took a really long time to fulfill his contract. He dropped like a visual album on Apple Music on like a Thursday. And then the following Friday, once he had completed his contractual obligation to Universal, he's like, I'm going to actually release my real album and have it be independent. And after that happened, and that's Blonde.
That's ballsy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one that actually went gangbusters.
Yeah.
And so after that happened, the head of Universal was like, none of our artists can do those exclusives anymore because they got burned so bad on that. So who knows if it continues? Apple really loves it. Tidal really loves exclusives. Spotify is like, they're not cool. We're not playing that game.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it'll be interesting. And now the interesting thing is the most powerful, biggest label in the world is like, that's not cool. We're not playing that game because it got us, screwed over.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see those forces, like very strange forces competing against each other about whether or not that should be something that happens.
You got to appreciate people like Be Skeptical in the chat. He says, I buy music on iTunes for bands I want to financially support
That's
because I feel that
nice.
streaming them doesn't give them their fair share.
That's
And you know
nice.
what? I would agree to that. There have been a
Yeah.
few occasions where it's like, no, I want you to have my money. Take some money.
Yeah,
So-
I'm never that generous.
Like,
I mean,
I
you've
don't
got a
think
band that
Bruno
you
Mars
absolutely
needed my
love,
money
right?
either.
Yeah, there's some.
Who?
I don't know.
Put you on the spot.
The Clash. I mean,
well, they're not going to be seeing much of that money.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
They're
Wait, who was it that said that in the chat?
Be Skeptical?
So be skeptical. One thing you might want to consider, I think that's a really great impulse. I have friends that do that too, that want to support the artists that they love by actually like just paying for their music. But also consider like if they're on Bandcamp, there's like places where some artists do tip jars and things like that. Because that means when you buy their merch, if you stream all their stuff and spend the exact same amount you'd spend on an album and spend on the merch, they're going to get a lot more of that money. Like a lot more
True.
of it.
Ah.
It totally depends on what artist you're talking about, their own their own contract with their label, if they have a label, if they don't. But the best way that you can like get money in their pocket is to like buy merch,
like
go
buy
to
their,
shows.
like buy their T-shirts and posters.
Yeah.
And, all right.
Not use Kazaa.
That's
Definitely.
not around anymore.
Wait, like, whoa.
Blast from the
Yeah.
past.
Come on, throw 'em back. I feel like the same way. I like the idea of being able to contribute as much as I can. Like I'll sit around on Spotify and poke around and find something new. Oh, this is great. And it's like, if I really fall in love with it, have some money.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
But now
tiered
we know, thanks to
exposure.
Joan, that we shouldn't be buying their
Well,
music.
you can't.
We
No,
should-
that's
we
really
should
helpful.
be buying T-shirts and
Yes.
It's really helpful for them too. I mean, buying their music because that's how, if they are on a label, that's how they're measured. That's like the metric where they like
Yeah,
their
true.
bosses,
Right.
the ones that they have to answer to for like, yes, your investment in me was worth it. Selling music, it's really important for that measure. But if your instinct is like, I want to give them my money, if that's what you want to help them on, then like then going to shows and buying merch is the
Yeah,
way
always
really
going to
help
shows
them
is always the best way to do
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
it, no matter what. I'm going to go to one in a couple weeks. Finally going to see At the Drive-In.
Oh,
Anybody
cool.
ever heard At the
Nice.
Drive-In?
out. Yeah.
I have not.
Band I fell in love with all through like
Yeah.
junior high and high
That,
school.
that takes
and-
me back to college. I'm a little older than
and
you. Yeah.
they
sure.
they went away for a while. Now they're back, and
That's
I
cool.
finally get to go see them, and I'm really stoked.
Brian's Palms.
Very cool.
That-
That and Coheed and Cambria.
Oh yeah, man, you're
Go
taking me
figure.
back to my like
Wow.
indie like go to shows kids days.
Well,
yeah.
they're playing their sophomore album in its entire, or not sophomore, their junior album in its entirety on the 15th anniversary, which
Really?
I'm extraordinarily excited
Oh, that's
for.
cool.
Unfortunately, I have to go to Terminal 5 for both of these.
What's
Yeah,
For,
that's the
for
price
those
that-
not in
this
New
is-
York, that's not a great
That's
venue.
the figurative price you have to pay.
Yeah, worth it. T5 sucks.
Does it really suck that bad?
I am not a fan.
I haven't been there. In
Their
like,
sound is
for
not
years.
that good,
okay.
but that's just me in my role of the producer guy with the headphones on.
I once got a
Griping.
tip from a musician friend of mine. Like, if you go to a show and like you have to say something to like if a friend of yours plays a show and they're terrible and you have to say something complimentary because they're your friend, you have to be like, "Man, the mix was awesome. I could hear everything."
Yeah, right.
That's the comment that you give them when you don't want to have to say, "It was
Okie
great.
dokie.
I love the part where you fell off the stage by accident or whatever."
But the
But the
mix,
mix
but the
was
mix
good.
was awesome.
The mix was